Welcome back. Welcome in. This is Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com, a Paramount podcast. I am Mike Casazza. That is Chris Anderson. Chris, I think for like the fourth time ever, you and I actually met this weekend. How about that?
Yes, we did. And this might have been the first time you and I hung out in person where someone from WVU didn't walk up and go, "Oh God, what are you guys doing together?"
It was in
So,
Richmond, so that was good.
yeah, that we
Yeah.
stayed out of the limelight so that no one at WVU could see us together.
Wives were there. My wife said to me on the way home, "You guys didn't talk about work once." And I was like, "Yeah, you know why? Because all we do is talk about work."
Yeah,
So that was
it's
refreshing.
enjoyable not to
Yeah.
talk about work. Yes.
Segue. Let's talk about WVU sports because we haven't done that in forever, right? We got a nice little reprieve, and now let's jump right back in. Not because we were out and about doing things on our own and having a social life, but just because the pace of things right now. A couple of sports converging for different reasons in their regular seasons, in their off seasons, in their roster construction plans, and their postseason pursuits. Yeah, baseball, yeah, basketball, yeah, football, staffs, rosters, schedule. For baseball winding down, action ramping up for basketball roster, maybe even the staff soon. Football in that stage right now where you kind of cross your fingers, something happens. That's good news. And players are away for a while. I'll be back on campus starting their summer courses soon, but still have a glow of last week with the spring game, the uniform reveals, multiple little draft buzz then and now too. So certainly a lot we could have talked about on Friday night that we can talk about here on Monday morning. That's why we're here. Where should we lead off on this one here? Because there are a couple things we could pull right away to get into, but I'm not sure which is more important than the other.
Here, let's start with let's go baseball. Let's get the bad news out first, Mike. Um, Three-game series against Cincinnati. Cincinnati, not a terrible team, not a great team. Um, West Virginia wins the first game, loses the next two, and a lot of the struggles. It was something we were asked about and we discussed on the podcast. I think it was last week. About do they have the pitching to get it done? That was a big problem for sure in this series, but not the only problem. Were there any takeaways you had from this three-game series? Because I got some thoughts for sure.
Yeah, that was one I really thought they had to win if they wanted to be like a legitimate, coast to the end postseason team. Like if they take 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 at Cincinnati, that's good because Cincinnati is not just kind of like a doormat in this league. First year coach could have been somebody different than who it was, by the way. Really good at home, and they've had some young players have come through for them, and you saw some of their pitching this weekend too. So that was good. I was the one who said that they had the pitching. They did not yet have the pitching. They have arms, and they certainly recruited players in the portal and they developed in their program that could put together a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, fourth game, if you're in a regional kind of a thing or a Big 12 tournament. They had the arms, they had the candidates for that. They just don't have the performers right now. And that's kind of troublesome because they've been working with that for a little bit, trying to figure out why is our Friday guy not our Friday guy anymore? Who is going to pitch Sundays for us? Who's going to get us, from the third inning to the sixth inning? A lot of those questions I haven't answered. And at some point, you stop trying to answer me and just go, well, that's our answer. We don't have one, or we don't have the guy for this. We don't have the person for that. We don't have the individuals for this. And moreover, now that seems like what the situation is to me. Have candidates, they don't have the answers right now, and that's going to be really difficult for first their remaining Big 12 series, Kansas State, TCU, and then if they go in when they go into the Big 12 tournament, how do you win an elimination game if you have to? How do you get out of a 4-3 game in the fourth inning and not have it turn into an 11-4 game in the fourth inning? There's going to be some questions there they have to answer. And again, they just haven't been able to do it yet for performance, for health. The portal hasn't been great to them. Sooner or later, you just realize that's what you have, and you're going to have to figure out how to cross your fingers the tightest to make it work. And that's not the best feeling going into a postseason atmosphere.
Yeah, this was a series where I think a lot of people are looking at the second and third game and seeing those losses, and it's not good because both kind of followed the same script of falling behind early. On Saturday, they were down 7-0 before they ever even got anything going on offense. On Sunday, they were down 4-0 in the first inning. So once you get put in those holes, you start getting desperate, you start getting down. Things just you get it, you understand why things are going to go bad after that. But even Friday night's game, I went back and watched it after the fact. I saw the win. Um, but that there were seeds of doubt even in that win right there. If you truly go back and look at that game, because the pitching was not great. Like, hey, Chris, what are you talking about? They won 5-4. They held on tight, close game. Yeah, but man, there's some stats you look at that you say, "Well, that's not great." In that game, they gave up 9 hits. They walked 5 batters. They hit 5 batters. They were putting a lot of people on base, and it was I want to say, if you put those numbers out there, baseball is a numbers game. It's a statistics game, probabilities type of game. That's a game Cincinnati probably wins 9 times out of 10, given some of
Yeah.
those numbers, because they just seem to West Virginia got very lucky to win that game. Let me put it that way, because Cincinnati was 2 of 14 with runners in scoring position. They were thrown out running to third on trying to advance like from first to third on a single. They grounded into double plays after they had multiple guys on base. They fouled out like on pitches that were or a ball that was barely in, able to be caught when they had multiple guys on base. Just seemed like a lot of things went against Cincinnati just for West Virginia to eke out that 1-run win. So even saying they won 1 of 3, it was even more concerning than that for me personally watching some of that.
Yeah, I was kind of concerned with some of the visuals, some of the responses Sunday. You had kind of an animated, I guess, catcher, pitcher, manager conference at the mound where it did seem like Randy Mazey and Aiden Major were having a dispute about something out there too. And then I don't know exactly why. You could hypothesize, but Randy Mazey does not let Major go out for the second inning. Granted, he gave up 4 runs in the first inning, but was there some dispute there? Do you not make a scene to pull that guy right there? Do you want to give your bullpen guy the most time to warm up? Like if you get mad at a guy during a pitching conference, it's one thing to pull him out, then you got to have a guy come in too. So that was a strange thing. And Major's been working on a bit of a short leash too, because he just hasn't had it lately. Good at the beginning of the year, has not had it lately in conference play. And then, there was some fielding indifference with Grant Hussey later in the game that was highlighted by a lot of people following it. And then he gets pulled from the game too. And that's a big bat in the middle of their lineup who has been relied upon to make something happen, whether it's off the bench for sac flies when he was injured, whether it's just getting the home run record because he has that type of power. I just think you keep an eye on those things and you wonder, what is the manager really who can see the end of the road right now? What does he do? What buttons does he press? I'm not saying that was fake or inauthentic. It might have been a long time coming stuff. It might have been you can't do this stuff, but those are reactions you don't often see from Maisie. Very even keel kind of a guy on the field, but not known for making a lot of like instant reactions. And for those two things to happen, and again, it might have been just a guy who was having a bad game pitching and a bad game hitting, but they did happen. And I think a lot of times there has to be an accountability built in things. And if a coach manager feels like things are getting away, you really kind of have to grab your team by the collar and say, no, this is not over yet. We have ways to do it. And we've seen that with his lineups lately too. They made some changes the last couple of games, top of the order, players in, players out, players who've been out coming back in, having a chance and not being able to sustain it. A lot of unknowns right now, Chris. Whether it's the pitching staff, the batting order, who goes where on the field. Maybe they find the right combinations at the right time, but I think all things considered, you'd obviously rather not have those unknowns right now.
Yeah, and to round this out, just circling back to what you said at the beginning, this could have been an opportunity to go 2 of 3 or 3-0 and solidify yourself as a postseason team and kind of cruise down the stretch. Now, I don't think it's completely a given that they're going to be in the postseason. They're going to have to do something. And I don't think they got to go. They got what, 3, 4, 7 games, maybe 8, depending on what they do with that midweek game a couple weeks from now. Um, you know, 4-4, 4-3, I guess if they only play 7, maybe that's necessary. I don't know, but they can't just cruise in like you said earlier. And they got Penn State on Wednesday, Kansas State 3-game series in Morgantown after that, maybe a midweek game next week, and then a 3-game series at TCU to end the season. And they could be going into that trip to Fort Worth needing a win, which again, not a given. And so missed opportunity for WVU baseball this weekend.
Yeah, what would you do with that open game on the 14th?
I would want to hold out hope or hold out on making a decision until after this week. Because here's my thing: if West Virginia goes, say, 3-1 or 4-0 here with Penn State and the Kansas State games, then you're like, okay, I'm good. Now let's just focus on TCU. I don't want to get a quote, gimme game, and then I have nothing to gain from it. And if I screw up, that might then force me back onto the bubble against TCU in the season. But I just don't know how quick of a turnaround you can get a game going. So they might have to make a decision before, obviously, those 4 games are played.
Yeah, right now there's no, from what I understand, there's no plan to play that game. There have been teams lined up that possibly it doesn't help the RPI win, especially lose. But it's there's somebody in the region who you could pay to come and play a game. Like, if you go 2-2, Chris, or 1-3, you lose to Penn State and then you lose the series to Kansas State. You might need a spike in your SOS in your RPI. Could you get? And I'm hypothesizing here. Could you pay Maryland to come to town and play a game for RPI purposes where that helps you? Like that's a risk. I don't know, but I would not make that decision right now. I think you're right there. See what happens. Again, cross your fingers really tight and hope the best works out for you, and you don't have to actually even worry about filling that spot. Doesn't do you any damage to not play that game. But if you play it and you lose, whether it's a good RPI team or a bad RPI team, and they're not going to play a can of soup that game, they're going to play somebody good if they do it. That's a big risk, and at this point of the season, probably not one they can take.
All right, let's flip over for a quick, quick trip to basketball
Mm.
here. Over the weekend, some rumored visitors for uh, Darren DeVries and his coaching staff. Um, Rumor that Arkansas point guard Keon Menafield was in town. Started his career in Washington, played 1 year there, came over to Arkansas, was ruled ineligible to start the season, played some, started some, got hurt, in, out of the lineup, starter, bench, not DNP coach's decision, kind of all over the place. But there have been a lot of discussions about what all was going on at Arkansas this past season and all the issues they had there. So don't know if you can really hold that against him. But maybe the more intriguing prospect on town was former Xavier signee Jonathan Powell, out of Dayton, Ohio. He is confirmed on campus on Sunday. I spoke with him briefly before he got there. Said he was coming in for the day. Said it was his only visit he had planned. Mike, do the math for me here. Help me out. Kid requests a release from his national letter of intent on a Friday. Within 36 hours, he is on campus at another school, and he has no intention of visiting another school. If you had some
Um,
kind of projection device where you could look into it, say a sphere type, clear sphere, where you could look into it and make a prediction, what would you
ball,
predict?
a ball of
Ball?
some sort of expensive glass-like material. Um, well, I would put the theory to the test and have him like play the Mega Millions for me or the Powerball because golly, what an unusual set of circumstances. Um, that's a really good player from Ohio, right?
Yeah,
Going to
state player of the
Cincinnati,
year in his division.
going to Cincinnati, playing for Sean Miller, excuse me, going to Xavier, playing for Sean Miller in Cincinnati. There's nothing wrong with that. Like that's a good lot for the player of the year in Ohio. What in the world happened? Don't know. But he must have had a sensation that this is going to be a good trip and a good business decision for him to come to Morgantown. It's very curious, Chris. I don't know. Like this is the type of thing that would make coaches mad in a lot of situations. How does this happen? But we don't know what the reason why he would ask out of his NLI is at Xavier. I'm sure there's a question and answer sometime in the future. Probably predict that answer right now. Best decision for me and my family, whatever. Right place, right time, though. I mean, whether it's on a map or whether it's on the roster development progress plan, they need somebody. They need youth. It'd be good to get some freshmen in because you can balance out the classes. So they have a freshman, they have 3 sophomores, and the rest are seniors right now. That's a good addition, and it looks like a pretty good player too. And if you keep, I mean, I don't think it really matters, but you're getting another like really good Ohio player in the West Virginia program. That's been a thing for 16 years now. why wouldn't that be the case in the future? But a lot of questions on this one too. Like what happened? What's the timing here? The string of events before this too, and where else might he possibly go? Like why doesn't he have more lined up? I'm sure there's other schools in Ohio, maybe even one at Cincinnati, that would like to have a talk with him because they probably liked him before, and then all of a sudden he was off the board. So good for West Virginia for getting him here and being first in line and maybe the only one in line. Keep an eye on this one though. I guess there's probably a lot to assume that we don't have answers for, but I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of other action in this story. This seems like I don't know. This seems pretty linear to me, Chris. It's going to go from A to Z pretty fast.
Yeah, it feels like it. I mean, when the player himself says, this is the one visit I'm taking, this is it, and it feels like the ball's in West Virginia's court. And I don't think West Virginia at this point is going to be wasting their time or anyone else's hosting visitors that they're not going to take. So keep an eye on it. But this is kind of following the pattern that we laid out on this podcast a week or two ago, a week or so ago, where we said, hey, they can't get all the players at once. They can't have 8 visitors on campus, all transfers, all guys you're telling they're going to start and get them all committed like that. It's not going to work like that. It's going to work where it's a situation of get 2 key pieces. Then once you get those 2, circle back for 2 more, circle back for 2 more, add a couple high schoolers and so on. The 2 examples we gave then, get a true point guard and get a serviceable big. What did they do? They got a true point guard. They got a serviceable big. And now I think it's going to be more focused on the transfer front. Another serviceable big. You're going to need more than one. And again, I keep saying the word serviceable because I don't want anybody to get any expectations of a 20 and 10 guy rolling into Morgantown at that spot. That's not what they're looking for. That's not what they're capable of getting at this point, I don't believe. And a 3-point shooter. Is that Menafield, who we mentioned from Arkansas, wasn't as prolific as you would have liked, or as efficient, excuse me, as you would have liked during his 2 years so far in college, but he was a really good 3-point shooter in high school. So maybe he just hasn't quite translated yet, or it's going to get there. He's a possibility. But then I also mentioned in the VIP buzz, hey, keep an eye on high school kids because you're going to need to balance out the roster, just like you said. It's not quite what it once was, where you want to have, say, 3 seniors, 3 juniors, 3 sophomores, 3 freshmen, but you need a couple freshmen. You need a couple high school kids that you're saying, hey, man, maybe you get a few minutes this year. Maybe you just develop and then you can be our guy next year. You got to do it. You got to go there. You limit your targets in high school. Maybe make them, raise the bar on what you would take out of high school. And this seems like this would fit. This is a guy who averaged like 20 and 6 and was the state player of the year. So it seems this is going to plan. If that plan is correct, we'll see.
And in defense of Powell too, and West Virginia and whatever like tampering or malfeasance you might suspect. I'm not necessarily sure that's true. Xavier has a lot of guards coming back. That was a strength of their team last year, and they did not have a lot of shooting though. And Powell figured to fit into that too. Good shooting guard, again, top 100 recruit, top 25-ish shooting guard in the country. Makes sense for the player of the year in Ohio to stay there and to go to Cincinnati. Excuse me, go to Xavier in Cincinnati. Sean Miller also brought in 3 other guards from the transfer portal. So now you go from a freshman who's maybe like a 4th or 5th option in the backcourt to a freshman who's 6th, 7th, maybe more in the backcourt too. And if you want to play right away, which is what everybody of his caliber wants, that's a long way to the court. And moreover, it's not what he signed up for. Like these guys sign in like November too, and things change. He's thinking, okay, I could be 3rd or 4th, maybe 5th, depending on what happens. And all of a sudden he signed, he's watching the team. They go into their postseason and he's thinking, all right, how can I come in and liven things up? What is my contribution going to be? Well, now it's after those guys who are returning, and it's after those guys who were also brought in from the portal too. And again, if West Virginia was on top of this and said, here's a guy who could wander. Let's keep an eye on it. And all of a sudden he's in the portal. He's not in the portal, but he's out of his NLI. Pick up the phone, be first, be second, be on that first wave of calls. So again, timing is everything. And they timed this one right. They got him on campus. Impressionable moment for him. Here's a guy who wants to be valued and needed for his play, and not just a spot in the roster, or the fact that he's from the state where he's going to play college basketball. West Virginia can certainly offer that right now too. In need of spaces to be filled by players, but also they need shooters. And if he can come in and do that, which is kind of what he was supposed to be doing for Xavier, that's a fit for the Mountaineers. Nothing to apologize for.
All right, let's stay with basketball, but move to a bit bigger picture than just Morgantown. The Big 12 came out earlier this month and said they were in favor of expanding the NCAA tournament. Mike, is this the first misstep of the new leadership in the Big 12, or is this them just looking out for the best interests of the Big 12, so it is the right decision?
Just think it's the way of the world, Chris. Everything I don't it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I don't like it. I can see though where coaches know they're measured by NCAA tournament bids, and if you're a first four out team or you're at a first like the one of the first four games and you're getting left out or you're getting one game on a Tuesday in Dayton because you are grinding through the Big 12 schedule, and the best you can do is just on the periphery of the tournament, that could be really frustrating and maybe job endangering for you too. So if you can add, they're talking going from 68 to 76 or 68 to 80. If you can add those spots, you likely increase your chances of making the tournament. Of course, you increase the chances for everybody else too. So it's not like you're going from 64 to 128. You're adding a small slice to the field. So I don't know. The money, I guess that would be a big deal, but NCAA tournament money is different than college football money and payouts for things like that. You get into units, it's very complicated. It can be nice, but it's not guaranteed every year too. But sure, more teams in the tournament, it helps. I suppose that's a powerful thing. I wonder about the vote, Chris. It's 16 coaches in there too. A couple of them are new. Like if you see Bill Self is for it and you're new to the Big 12, do you not raise your hand? Right? Are you gonna be the new guy who's like, no, I don't want to expand? Everybody's like, what are you doing? Supposed to expand, right? And all of a sudden you're left out. You're not invited to the golf tournaments, things like that. Oh gosh. I wonder about the vote. Was it 9-7? Was it 14-2? I don't know. In favor of can be like, hey, would you be in favor of expanding? Yeah, sure. Do they even have like a vote? I don't know. I wonder about that. That's a detail that's unsaid and maybe a question that was unasked. But yeah, they're in favor of it. What number? Sound like 76 for Brett Yormark. But if you think about Brett Yormark, he's a guy that wants a national conference that's recognized for basketball. He's acted that way. He's kind of said that a little bit before too. That's why you're talking about adding Gonzaga for just basketball, and now you're going from Orlando to Spokane. That's a big conference, right? But it's also going to be the premier conference, which already is the case. But now you're going to be bigger and better and wider span in the map of the United States. I think he fancies that, and if you can get more teams representing that tournament, that's a good thing too. But you can also make this tournament a spectacle that it kind of is. Maybe it isn't quite as big as it could be. I'm not in favor of it. I don't like expanding it. I thought going from 64 to 68 was weird, but there's something kind of intriguing about those first four games. So there's been some good stories born out of that in the past few years. But what are we getting out of 76? What are we getting out of 80? How does that tournament look? And then what are those extra teams going to really do? Like, I know that some of the first four teams have made a run and been good, but those are like major conference teams or teams that like profiled as very good that just for one reason or another weren't at that point of the season. You're adding is the 80th team going to make it to the Elite Eight? I don't know. That's difficult for me. So now you're just giving like consolation prizes and trophies and ribbons and things like that, which I suppose the college experience that's part of it. But I guess it's coming down to the money, Chris. Like, how does this work for money? That's what it always comes down to me lately too. So I don't like it. I'm sure there's some financial aspect to it that makes sense. It hasn't been explained to me yet. I'm sure it's there. I'm also not sure it's going to happen either.
You said it best right there. Because I'm against it. I don't like expansion for a lot of reasons. Again, why are we rewarding the 80th best team, 76th best team? I'm just not for it. So I won't pile on, if you will, and I will move on to football
Yeah.
instead. Mike, maybe the biggest news over the weekend. We put out our depth chart projections. Big news. Um, there were a few differences. We
Mm.
won't delve into the differences between ours and Andrew's since Andrew's not here to defend himself. But I'll say that I purposefully did not look at yours or Andrew's
Yeah.
until I had written mine for obvious reasons. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not influenced by anything. Um, so we ended up with a couple things different, or not too many things different, but a couple things different, like how we listed positions or where guys are playing. Again, in part because I didn't look to see where you had guys. but the main difference in our depth chart, I want to talk it out here, was mostly just at wide receiver or at all receivers. Um, for the outside receivers, I went Ray and Bray, and you went Ray and Clement. Let's talk it out. Let's talk it out right here. So, are we essentially
Okay.
discussing Clement versus Bray? Are we talking two different positions? Why are we on a different page on here, or does it even matter?
So it's a difficult one to answer because so many of these players are like multi-position too. I just happen to think that they're going to start Ray. Obviously, I think that's your. I'm not sure they have a number one on this team yet. Probably won't even after the transfer portal. But they have players that think that can be that one. And by the end of the season, my bet would be that it's most likely Ray. Um, Second to him is probably Clement, and that's a bit of a stretch to me, more so than Ray. But I could be wrong there too. And I don't think those two are separated by so much, but I think that they're probably ahead of the third option. I don't know what they're doing with Bray, Chris. Like I've seen him used inside and outside, XZ. I guess the H position would be the inside spot, the slot position. I think he's going to be on the field a bunch too. But my guess would be outside for him because he's so big and fast and strong. But he's just such a big guy in the middle of the field, and he's kind of twitchy with the ability to break through tackles. That I like him as an inside guy. I know they've mentioned that Clement is a tackle breaker. He's not like Ray. He's just not built like Bray. Sorry. If you look at Jaden Bray and look at Hudson Clement, that's different. I just figure he profiles more inside. But I honestly, like if we did a PFF thing during the open week in the middle of the season, you found out that Clement had played 40 snaps inside and 90 snaps outside, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Like I could see something like that happening. He just knows the positions too, but I don't think they're position list. I think they're going to rotate a lot, and then it's not so much about inside outside to me, Chris. They're going to have four receivers in the field sometimes, but it's going to be Cole Taylor as the fourth receiver or one of the four receivers. They're just going. That's not. He's not going to not be on the field in those spots. So you're not going to have two inside guys. So you're going to have Clement, Ray, Taylor, and then who? Is it Bray? Is it Fox? Is it Rodney Gallagher? Is it Darius Farmer? I just think if you go to a situation with four, you're gonna have Cole Taylor out there, and not as an outside guy. He's gonna be an inside guy, which means you're probably gonna have Bray, Clement, Ray outside, and I just feel like Bray is more of an inside guy. I'm not married to any of this, and I think that the confusion in the answer is probably by design by the coaches, not intentionally. I think they want to have players who can do multiple things and can keep you from keying on somebody, but you can throw like bodies out there across the field too at those receiver spots.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I considered Bray one of the inside receiver positions when I was putting together my list. And yeah, it would have been Ray, Clement, and Bray if I had put Bray on the inside. So it's not like we've got crazy differences here. I just wanted to talk it out a little bit
Mhm.
because yeah, and again, it kind of takes us back to the what you just said. There isn't much difference in there, but is there a very clear cut number one, or is West Virginia in this situation again where they have, hey, you got five number two receivers, or four number two receivers, or two, three receivers? We'll see. The other part where we were different was again just more of a clerical thing here. You had the H receiver and the slot. I only did just one inside receiver. With yours, Fox and Gallagher were both starting because the two inside receivers. I did one and had Fox over Gallagher. If you had to pick one, you picking one, or does it matter?
I like Gallagher. I think I've mentioned this a couple of times. I wonder if he can't be a guy who gets like 30 catches and 30 handoffs, something like that. I would have Fox ahead of him right now. Just less to prove, more body of work in his back pocket.
All right. The last topic in our little news of the day podcast here. The over-unders were released earlier this month, futures for the upcoming season from FanDuel. I believe we've already mentioned the fact that West Virginia was over or under 6.5 wins, with a little bit of juice on the over,
Hmm.
meaning slight pick for the over there from Vegas. Fair or unfair?
Surprised it's not higher, just because I think it would be more attractive to some people to pick the under if it was 7.5. I think the action on 6.5 We'll probably eventually raise that number a little bit. I just think 6.5 is, if you've seen this team late last season, in this offseason, why would they be 3 games worse than last year? Don't see that.
I'm with you. I think it's hard, and here's where I think it's difficult if you're Vegas, and I'm surprised like maybe the juice is not higher for the over here. They hate even numbers.
Yeah.
Remember, was it 2 years ago? Yeah, it was 2 years ago where they started it at five, just a flat five. And you and I were like, bet the house because they should get the over. And even if everything goes wrong, they'll at least get the five and you'll get your money back. Well, everything went wrong. They got the five. You got your money back if you listen to us. So they hate even numbers. If you go all the way up to 7.5, then you're probably having to, push the juice on the under and kind of even it out to try to make it even for Vegas. But the more, I want to say alarming thing, but the thing that catches my attention more than just the over under 6.5 is, would you like to guess out of the 16 teams where that puts West Virginia in the Big 12 conference with six and
Is
a half
it
wins?
is it eighth or ninth?
10,
Is it okay?
10. Yeah. So it goes in order. Kansas State at Utah, tied at 9.5 wins at the top. Texas Tech, Kansas, UCF, Arizona, all with 8.5. Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and TCU at 7.5, and then West Virginia at 6.5. So again, this isn't the preseason poll, but it might give you a hint as to where the general public might be leaning, with West Virginia as the number 10 team in the Big 12 conference. Fair or
I take
unfair,
the over on
Michael?
that one too. I think they're going to
Yeah,
finish
okay.
higher than 10th. Yeah. I just did this really quick. I went over, and my mathematical explanation is pretty easy here. They're going to beat Albany. I'm not really threatened by Pitt, by Cincinnati, and by Baylor. There's 4. Now I just got to get 3. And then their toughest games at home this year, their toughest games are at home: Penn State, Kansas State, Kansas, and Iowa State. Are they going to lose all them? I don't think so. So there's 1. So now you're at 5. Your toughest games on the road: Oklahoma State, Arizona, and Texas Tech. Are they going to go 0-3 and lose all the tough games on the road? I would say no. So give me 1. Now I'm at 6. And then the only game I don't have there is UCF. That's a home game. If I'm trying to get over under and I'm betting my money, Chris, not even yours, I'm betting my money on West Virginia at 6-6 and has to win the UCF game. I know it's not how it works in the schedule, but UCF in Morgantown, I saw that game last year. I don't know why you wouldn't feel good about West Virginia going over by breaking down the schedule the way I just did there.
All right. You guys keep that in mind. Mike, I think, wants to take the charity bets this year at this rate. We're going to have to bring you back for the charity
The
bets this
charities do
year.
not want that, though. Unfortunate for them.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I think that's going to cover everything that was in the news over the last couple days that we missed over the weekend and had to catch up on. Again, maybe sometime in the next week or two, we'll pop back into a Q&A podcast once the message board, let's say, veers away from their current discussions and gets back to asking questions that we can answer on the podcast.
Can't wait. Until then, I'm Mike Casazza.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
We will talk to you then.